Welcome. We bid you welcome. This is the 5 Count. Dark Side of the Ring, season 4, with my co-captain John the Music Nut. How you doing, my brother?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Hot,
Yes.
hot. Yee. Another
Hot
heat.
in the city tonight, as Billy Idol would say, huh?
Exactly. Boy, yeah, it's we're supposed to get to about 100 degrees here in Alabama, which I know for those folks over in Arizona, that's like, oh, that's an Arctic cool front for us. But yeah, yeah. So we have a little bit of another scorcher coming. So but we have so. If you've been following the 5 Count the last couple of weeks, as we've been lovingly calling this series, we've been talking about the Vice TV series Dark Side of the Ring, and we are now up to its current season, where the last episode of the season just aired. About a week or two ago now, I think it has been. So we are up to its current season. I think they're already trying to get ideas for season 5. So who knows what kind of things they'll bring up. So we could probably talk about some ideas after we go through our 5 highlights here. So without too further ado, John the Music Nut, start us off with which one you want to talk about first.
All right. And before we get started, Dark Side of Ring. This show is brought to you by Camarena Vodka, Target. Make sure you go to Target to buy your kids' clothes for back to school. And last but certainly not least, Lato's Lemon Herb Remix.
Oh boy.
Because when you watch these shows again on Sling, you're hit with these commercials over and over, especially Lato's Lemon Herb Remix. I didn't know who Lato was until I had to look her up. I'm like, who is this woman? She's a rapper who had a number 3 hit last year on the Billboard Hot 100. Apparently, she's making waves.
Wow.
Apparently, her Lemon Herb Remix is good too.
I guess so. I watched mine on Amazon Prime. I bought the series for like $20 or something like that. So this way I had it coming, so I don't get the commercials, unfortunately, I guess. So there you go.
Ones, yeah, but you get the same ones, especially from Wingstop. Wingstop is the restaurant, and they have Lato's Lemon Herb Remix. I went and I Googled it. There are no Wingstops in PA. Well, not within 100 miles of me, anyway.
I have one right down the road from me.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I didn't know about this Lato's Lemon Remix thing, but I do have a Wingstop just down the road from us, and not bad.
Yeah. Well, maybe down the road you could give it a shot and tell us how good it is.
I'll see what I can do. I'm not much of a lemon guy, but I'll see what I could do.
Yeah, I wonder how it works with wings. Anyway,
yes.
Lato's Lemon Herb Remix. There you go. And they show her going up to the hotel, and there's these 2 guys there. One of them looks just like Jermel Charlo. By the way, Canelo Alvarez, Jermel Charlo, September 30, only on Showtime pay-per-view. Anyway, for all you boxing fans out there.
Oh my.
Jermel going up 2 divisions. He's chasing greatness against the great Canelo Alvarez.
Oh boy.
There you go. plugging like nobody's business to start out here.
Hey, for all those companies who we just plugged, I hope you guys give us a little bit of a plug back for this stuff. Just saying. So
exactly. Hook us up with some Lato's Lemon Herb Remix and Camarena Vodka.
There you go.
And some Target gift cards.
So, there you go.
Oh, anyway, and in all seriousness, we're going to talk about the Grahams. Now, This was the most educational show for me. I didn't see the Florida wrestling back when Eddie Graham ran the territory. We lived in WWF territory here in the Northeast. So my experience with Eddie Graham was through wrestling magazines. My experience with Mike Graham was watching WCW later and seeing him on, he was on Now and Then, but I think by that point he was at the tail end of his career, but you always heard how he was an excellent wrestler. And later on, you heard about he took no shit from anybody too. which he did a lot of WWE stuff, like back like when they were doing the when they were putting out DVDs about the territories, like a lot of those discussions Mike Graham was a part of. If you think of it from a wrestling perspective, the Grahams were like the Ganyas, but the Grahams had the tragedy. And the fact that you had the superstar running the promotion, who was a fantastic wrestling mind, was a great wrestler, and then became a promoter, and then he owned the territory. And then you have his son, who is a great worker in his own right, but he's doesn't quite have the charisma that the father has. So he's in his footsteps, but he still has a remarkable career himself.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not, but you know, you always hear about the father. But the son was a kick-ass performer. Greg was, as was Mike.
Yeah.
So this episode talks about the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. Nicole Gossett is Eddie Graham's granddaughter, Mike Graham's daughter. A lot of the emphasis is on her, what she went through, what she persevered through, and now as she has moved on with her life, because her grandfather, Eddie, committed suicide. And then her brother, Stephen, commits suicide, and Nicole finds his body. And then her father, less than 2 years later, dies from suicide.
Yeah.
And then later on, and Brian Blair was fantastic on this. He tells us there was actually a fourth suicide. Eddie Graham's father had committed suicide. I believe there was another, like a brother in there too.
I
Or maybe
believe, yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah, so she has persevered through all this, and God bless her for it, because she's gone through hell that most of us cannot imagine. It was great to see Kevin Sullivan here. I wish we could see more Kevin Sullivan talking about wrestling, because he works with the Grahams, is particularly in Florida, for decades. He had a long, great career, but he's probably best known for his run in Florida. He tagged with Mike Graham. He was an opponent of Mike Graham. He's a historian nearly on the level of Jim Cornette. Like, if you ever hear a interview with Cornette and Sullivan, you ever see it, just sit back and listen, because there is so much knowledge and history there.
Mm-hmm.
It was great to see Kevin.
Yeah.
But this is a story of perseverance. I should have said right at the beginning, peace of mind, because that's what the Grahams were always striving for, and Nicole has it.
Yeah.
But the rest of the ones that we're talking about did not.
Yeah.
I really feel for Donna, Mike's wife, who wasn't on camera, and you can understand why, because she's gone through that same hell.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a dark story, but we have someone's gone through it. It's kind of, I'm going to say, a happy ending, because she's survived and she's learned from it and moved forward, and is taking care of her daughter and remembering the good times. How when she was a kid, she said it was not uncommon for wrestlers to come over to the house. Magnum TA was getting his start. He was sleeping on her couch. So the only time I was really scared when someone came in was Andre the Giant. Andre scared me a little bit, and you can understand that. Andre was 7'4", over 500 pounds. But Eddie was like a legend in Florida.
Yeah.
Eddie was, anywhere he'd go, he'd be recognized and very well respected, to the point where he had a good relationship with Vince McMahon Sr. and Vince McMahon Jr. If he had lived, what would have happened? Would they have still stayed in business because Vince Jr. wouldn't have gone after his territory out of respect for his father? That's a good question. But what happened is Eddie died in 85.
Yeah.
When the was really taken off. That was the year we had WrestleMania. And what had happened after Eddie died, Dusty Rhodes was a big star in Florida. He took all of his guys and went to NWA. And that, in a McMahon-esque move there, because he took all the talent instead of Vince.
Right.
He took them all to NWA, and in Florida, in a couple of years, there was no more federation there.
Right.
So this is it is an interesting story. And let's not forget about the original Graham family, because back then you didn't have to be related. If you looked like somebody, nobody's going to look at your birth certificates, as they say.
Yep.
So the original Graham was Dr. And before we go on, Jim Cornette, fantastic. What a historian.
Yes.
We can listen to Jim Cornette all day, talk about wrestling.
Yep.
Oh man, but he educates us on Dr. Jerry Graham, for those of us who didn't know.
Oh boy.
Original Graham. And he was a talent, and he was a crazy man.
Yes, he was.
Wow.
Yes, he was.
That's that story where he finds out his mother is not doing well in the hospital, and he's like, you make sure that she doesn't die and stuff like that. And he gets to the hospital, and of course she's dead. And here he's got like a shotgun, a hunting knife, and another revolver of some sort. And he's like, how did he not get arrested for that? But it's because of his name, and he was respected. He takes his dead mother, slings it over his shoulder, and goes out to bury her. I mean,
wow.
I'm listening to Cornette tell this story, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. But, it just sounded like Jerry Graham was kind of one of these, man's man kind of person, and you didn't mess with him, But yeah, he was, and he certainly kept the character. He kept the kayfabe. It was that way everywhere he went. But I don't know what I forgot to figure out. I forgot to look up what happened with him in his life. I don't remember what happened to him. So
he lived to an older age. I know that. But in the show, they tell us, well, Eddie had to get away from Jerry because Jerry was crazy. Yeah. And Eddie went and did what he did, and then became the king of Florida wrestling. So, but that all happened after Jerry had taken his mother out of the hospital.
Right. Okay. So he passed away in 1997. Okay. Right. So yeah. So he was about 68 when he passed away. So
right.
Yeah. No, he just had bad health. So okay.
Right. So yes, and they didn't talk about this, but the original Graham family was you had Dr. Jerry, you had Eddie, then you had Crazy Luke Graham. I remember seeing footage of him in WWE, and last but certainly not least would be Superstar Billy Graham, was considered one of the Graham family. Although you would never really think that because of what he had done later, particularly in WWE.
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting thing about the footage there, I saw how respected Eddie was, how he had such a good relationship with WWE or WWF at the time. You had champion versus champion. You saw the signing of the contract with Harley Race and Superstar Billy Graham. I wish I'd seen that match back in the day, but I would have been like 6.
Yeah.
But that was the respect that Eddie had in wrestling. He wound up being president of the National Wrestling Alliance for a short time.
Yeah, he was well
respected in the NWA too. So
yes,
but one of the things I thought about was like, wow, can you imagine a Stu Hart versus Eddie Graham kind of thing?
Yeah.
As like, not necessarily a wrestling match, but like a shoot match, because how Stu liked to stretch everybody and and really make them suffer, where sometimes Eddie would get in there and train people, and he'd be like, he was really wanting to hurt these people pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So you have these two different types of styles of training, and you can you just imagine what something like that could have created? But yeah, that was we if anything, we hope that the daughter, the Nicole, as the episode's called, broke the cycle.
Absolutely. And it seems like she did. I mean, very good woman, a very good mom, and she was able to tell the story, very matter-of-factly, and about her relationship with Mike, how it was kind of up and down because she would always tell him the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm glad. She did an excellent job here. She was very level-headed. Very level-headed considering what she went through.
Absolutely.
But good head on her shoulders, and she was very good, and everyone else was. And one more thing I want to talk about, about protecting the business. That was, we talk about Stu Hart. That was Eddie Graham too. Kevin Sullivan tells a story about there was a guy who wanted to wrestle part-time. He was a full-time butcher, I believe, and he put him in with Kevin, and Eddie says he better come back bloody. Say it to Kevin, and Kevin goes, I kept my job, because he goes back to his job. If I don't do that, I lose mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was wrestling then.
Oh yeah.
Protect the business. And like Bill Watts, he had the thing, if I hear you get beat up in a bar, if you lose a fight, you lose your job.
Yeah.
We have to protect the business.
Yep.
So
Yep.
Very interesting and educational episode. All the best to Nicole's daughter, and to Donna.
Yep, absolutely. So from that story, we go to a story that we wish they would break the cycle, or he would break the cycle. And I'm talking about the last episode of the season, and we're going to talk a little bit about Marty Jannetty. So Marty Jannetty is one of these guys. You hear the term in tag teams how you don't want to be the Marty Jannetty. Because Marty Jannetty's, he was the one who got the boot. he got kicked out of his team. He was and what happened with him? He it's like either he gets forgotten or whatever. It's like, well, sometimes that's not being all that bad, being the Marty Jannetty, because you could look at the ride they rode for the longest time. But
Sean. Yes.
but with him and Sean, but oh my goodness, he just couldn't let go of the lifestyle. The one, between the rock and roll lifestyle of the women and the booze, and like he had the girlfriends in St. Louis and the girlfriends here, the girlfriends there, and you just. What was his thing? The GAT, God's amusement toy. I think it was
amusement toy. Yes.
And it's like, it's time to screw around with Marty a little bit. Let's do something really good to him. Oh boy, yeah. It just, he just when you thought he was going to get a little bit of a break, something always kept happening to him. And it's like that. Is like the Graham cycle being broke, finally getting broken. Well, this cycle just keeps spinning round and round and round. Yes. One of these days he's finally going to own up, and he's going to maybe realize that, hey, maybe my choices have been kind of some of the blame here. But again, don't know. I think I saw an article somewhere where he's like, it was in his episode that he said, "Oh, that episode's full of lies." Is he the one telling them, or was it from the other people that he's calling the liars? But I don't know. With you talking about blurring the lines of reality here, I don't even know where to begin with the Marty Jannetty episode. But obviously the story of him, talking about protecting the business. Man, him and Sean getting at it in the bar that time, and then you finally get to the part where Vince is like, oh, I think I want to break you guys up. Marty's like, well, yeah, I think let's talk with Sean. Yeah, I'm ready to do it. So you have a lot of that. So you didn't know really who to feel bad for here in this in this episode. Sometimes you want to feel bad for Marty, and then sometimes you don't. But you have all these things. Then you have so he goes through that whole time period of after the Rockers break up, and he has all these different problems. Then he comes back. They do the new Rockers with Al Snow and as Leif Cassidy.
Yep, I remember that.
And you probably all know how he got the name Leif Cassidy. He's like, oh, we need to look like 70s pinup models. And Cornette says, you what, like Leif Cassidy or like Leif Garrett and Sean Cassidy?
Sean Cassidy, yep.
So there you go. But the team had potential, but then Marty he got a DUI or he got a something or whatever. And well, there goes that. And then Leif Cassidy then turns into Avatar with the guy who the masked wrestler who walks to the ring without the mask and then he puts it on in the ring. Yeah. What? Anyway, but that's not about Al Snow. So yeah, Marty just kept having one problem after another, and then you get this story about him supposedly killing somebody, which thank goodness it doesn't appear that they don't seem to have any records of missing people from back then, so maybe that was just a crazy story that came up. But one of the things you see is Marty's leg is blown up like one of Iron Sheik's weighted club
Persian
things.
Yeah.
One of those Persian clubs he was throwing around. That St. Louis girlfriend was interesting. Brutus Beefcake and his wife, interesting. Al Snow was good.
Al was great.
Al was great in this one. I'd love to hear more of him in upcoming episodes.
Absolutely.
But you just don't know. You really just don't know if you should feel bad for him or not.
He rolled his ankle when he was tagging up with Al Snow, and that's been an issue with him ever since. That sucks that has happened to him, and he's had to continue. Has issues with it to this day, and how they have to wait for the swelling to go down to do another surgery on it. But part of that, I think, is he never took a break either. He kept wrestling, whether it was with WCW or some small indie show. He kept going because that's what he loved and that's what he knew. So in that aspect, and I know injuries are part of wrestling. And from what you hear from his doctors, one who went to high school with him and played high school football with him, he always went 100%. He always went hard in football and hard in wrestling in high school, and that's how he always went. Well, if you do that, your prime is going to be very memorable, but it might be very short. But it seems like he's had all these issues with that ankle for about 30 years or so.
Yeah.
And he had a high flying style, which was hard on your knees and your hips and your joints. Shawn Michaels has had a lot of issues with it as well because of that style. He had more issues with his back though.
Yeah.
But the episode here, I mean, the thing about Marty, he is ultimate bullshitter. Good heart. He talks very fondly of Sean. And Karen Walker does not. I mean, I could see where Karen's coming from. She goes, that's the Heartbreak Kid. That's really him. Mm-hmm. And Marty was like, oh, yeah, you can get cocky sometimes, but hey, he's my brother. I love him. So, okay. And Sean did give him another shot. He went and called him right when Marty was about to commit suicide. Give me a sign to stop me, God. And the phone rings and it's Sean.
Yeah.
It's crazy how life works sometimes.
Yeah.
And he gave him another opportunity, which Marty squandered a week later by getting in a fight with his girlfriend, who was a stripper, and he was already on parole, so they threw him in the pen.
Yep.
And he lost a contract where he could have made $1 million a year.
Sure.
And that was his last shot as Mike Moran. Want to make sure I say his name right.
Yeah.
Yes, he was. They're still friends to this day, and he was in the tag team Disorderly Conduct. He educates us. He was really good on this episode, educating us a lot about Marty, since he's got all that history with him. Yeah. And Brutus was great to have there too, because he was doing the barber shop when Rockers broke up, which could have been a pivotal moment for both of them, as Al Snow very accurately says. They both could have went to the moon, but it was only Sean that went. Because Sean straightened himself out. Let's be honest. He straightened himself out. He saw an opportunity. He worked on his game, and he became a superstar. He was one of the big guys in the 90s, no doubt about it. You could say he was the number one guy in the second half of the 90s. He certainly was. I was always a Bret Hart fan, but Sean had a little more charisma. I'll admit that. And Sean was more into high flying stuff, which was getting over at that point. He was a tremendous performer, Shawn Michaels. Yeah. So yeah, this very good episode to end it. You don't know what stories are true and what are fiction. One thing I will say, I've seen some YouTube videos with Marty, and Marty wasn't coherent on a lot of them. Here he sounded coherent. I mean,
a little better. Yeah.
He's got I think to this day, I mean, he uses a lot of, but his pain on a scale 1 to 10 is a 12, according to his orthopedic surgeon. That's on a good day.
Yeah.
But this was a good episode. You got to wish all the best to Marty, though. And, and
I think Marty could use a little help from somebody that I think Sean went to get a little help from, and as far as his back and stuff went, and that would be Dallas DDP.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
Because he was in one of Dallas's DDPY workouts, the DDP yoga workouts. It's one called it's a long workout called the Diamond Cutter. And he does this one particular stance where it's, you have to understand the DDP yoga program. It's yoga positions, calisthenic kind of stuff, dynamic resistance, and like physical therapy kind of stuff. So Dallas and a guy named Craig Aaron, the yoga doc, kind of took this and started putting all this together. And I think Kimberly was involved with it in the early days as well, Dallas's first wife. And they all kind of put this together. Well, Dallas says, in one of the workouts, he does this one position he calls the showstopper. So he does the whole arms thing, and he does this kind of a dynamic resistance thing where you're doing the flexing kind of thing. And it's that whole idea of when Sean would do the Yngwie Malmsteen pose is how the best I could call it.
Yeah.
But then he does this, but obviously you're not squatting, you're not doing that low. But anyway, but he acknowledges that, to HBK, Sean, one of the first guys in my business to do my workouts. So he acknowledges that Dallas helped him out with that. So I think Sean could use a little, or Jannetty could probably have used some of that help too. But, one of the things you talked about, you just keep going with the injuries. And I know this is probably going to come up in one of the other folks we're going to talk about. Maybe this will be a good segue to that. If you're injured, you lose your spot.
Yes, that's true.
So anyway, and you sometimes you just keep going, but like I said, that could be a good segue for who we could talk about next. So there you go. So so there you go. Marty Jannetty, cautionary tale, maybe. Let me one more thing, but before we segue into the next thing.
Sure.
Pat Diamond, or not Pat Diamond,
That's
Pat
Tanaka.
Tanaka. Uh, wow.
He was awesome.
He was awesome, but he looking a little rough, but he was awesome in this episode.
Oh my God. I mean, yeah, he had, I remember seeing him in Bad Company.
Yes.
With Paul Diamond, those matches with the Midnight Rockers.
Oh,
they were spectacular. And then later on, Tanaka was in the Orient Express. That Tanaka can go.
He could certainly go.
He was a bump machine.
Yes.
And later on, he became a professional stuntman.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that, but yeah, he became a stuntman later on. But oh my God, yeah, he
was really good in this episode.
So I really liked what he had to say with this one.
Absolutely, I'm glad that they got him, just because he had so much experience working against Marty Jannetty. I mean, he's got stories, man. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah, one of the more unsung heroes in wrestling, Pat Tanaka. He was never going to be the top guy, but he was always going to put on a great match and work his ass off for you.
Absolutely.
Oh
yeah.
my God.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
No doubt. All right. So I'm glad you gave the segue. So now we're going to talk.
I just thought of it on the fly.
Oh, that was great. No, that was fantastic. It was fantastic. And I got my notes here. We're going to talk about the greats and underrated. And he was very important to us because we saw him coming up. We definitely saw him in his first run in WWF, and that's Mr. Bam Bam Bigelow. Yep. Scott Bigelow. So now Bam Bam Bigelow was ahead of his time. Back in the day, they were calling Big Van Vader the next Bigelow. Bigelow is a tale of too much too soon, but then he redeemed himself, but the injuries caught up with him. He was a legend in Asbury Park, as Diamond Dallas Page will tell you in this episode. He was great here. Self high five. Oh my gosh, but his family, you got to have a lot of admiration and respect for Bam Bam's family. They said he was a family man, and he had a great family.
Yes,
his wife Dana, she's a strong woman, a strong mother, and you can agree with some of the opinions that she has, that she holds to this day. Both of his sons and his daughter actually at a very young age prevented something that could have been a lot worse. When she saw her dad Bam Bam nodding off at the wheel, and eventually he got pulled over and he got arrested. That could have turned into a horrible accident that could have cost both of their lives. But Bam Bam Bigelow was a legend in Asbury Park before he was a wrestler. He was in bars so young because he already looked like a man. The first guy I ever saw with tattoos on his skull. He had a very distinct look. He went through the Monster Factory, Larry Sharp's wrestling school. Larry Sharp was on a lot of WWE cards that we watched when we were kids. That from the Spectrum and from the Garden and from the Capitol Center. He would usually put guys over, but he was a great heel. He was a great worker and a great teacher.
Yes, he was.
And he trained Bam Bam. Bam Bam wasn't in the business too long before he went to WWE, but the hype was already there. They had gotten in touch with Bill Apter, who's on this episode.
Yeah.
And Bill Apter, there's another historian you can just sit back and listen to him talk for hours. Bill Apter, I mean, we bought Pro Wrestling Illustrated. We bought The Wrestler. We bought Inside Wrestling.
Yep.
We were Bill Apter marks when we were kids.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So he got the push early on. I remember when he was tagging up with Hogan. And in hindsight, you're thinking to yourself, well, why isn't he a monster heel at this point? But then you're thinking, you already got the monster heels there. that he's feuding, somebody's got to tag up with Hogan. So, Warrior hadn't made his name yet. You needed to have that top good guy. You see this guy, he's huge, he's athletic, he's doing cartwheels, moonsaults. He's 25 years old. We'll bring him in as a baby face. And he got a little too big for his britches. And Andre the Giant, as was his wont, if you got too big for your britches, he would teach you a lesson. And he taught one to Bam Bam. Bam Bam left. He worked in WCW for a little bit. He went to Japan. He got over in Japan. Then he comes back to the WWE. Now he gets his second shot. He had really good matches that second run. I remember his matches with Bret, and Bret Hart were great. And I remember Big Boss Man's last match at WWE, Bam Bam beat him clean. And then Boss Man went to WCW, and then he became Guardian Angel and a bunch of other names. But Bam Bam was over. And then they put him in with Lawrence Taylor. Remember that feud when that started?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. He would see it. He saw him in the crowd at
Royal Rumble, I think it was.
Yep.
And he thought he was laughing at him, and he shoves him, and Vince, then later we apologize for Bam Bam Bigelow's actions, and so they're okay, blurring the lines of reality again. So, but
and gets an opportunity, puts LT over, because he's probably the guy who would make LT look, and he was a big fan of Lawrence Taylor. I mean, you were from this area, you loved Lawrence Taylor. Even if you weren't a Giants fan, you loved Lawrence Taylor, because he reinvented the linebacker position in National Football League.
Yep.
So, he's still considered one of the 2 or 3 best linebackers. So a lot of people still say he's the best linebacker there ever was. But he was a star in New Jersey, New York, PA. We really respected him. So he's the headliner for WrestleMania 11. Lawrence Taylor, Bam Bam Bigelow. LT had just retired from the NFL. Bam Bam makes him look as good as he possibly could. And I don't think any other wrestler on that roster could have did with LT what Bam Bam had done. And after that, I remember hearing interviews with Bam Bam. They said they were going to give him a championship run after that, and they never did.
I think a lot of people crapped on that match.
They crapped. I don't think it was.
I mean, I don't know. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't. I don't think it was. I think for that to have main evented a WrestleMania was. I think that was where they crapped on it the most, because they're like,
I agree with that.
Why is this over a world's title match? Why is this being over this or that or whatever? That I just remember that not a lot of good vibes came out of that one from back then. But
right. And I think it was because they thought LT's celebrity status was that high that it could have been a headliner. I think on the East Coast, yeah. I don't know about throughout the country. But I think Bam Bam made him look as good as he possibly could have, because LT was severely winded during that match.
Big time.
He was winded. He could barely stand up after it was over.
Yeah.
Bam Bam made him look like $1 million.
Well, and remember, it was almost kind of like a lumberjack match kind of thing, because you had a lot of NFL players around the ring, Mongo being one of them.
Yes.
And there's some other, I think, wrestlers also too. So, the ring was surrounded by a bunch of different people too.
So that you have that element into it. So you have all that big celebrity stuff going on with it, which is probably why it was the main event of that night. But yeah.
And with that high flying athletic style, which we talked about with Marty Jannetty, who was probably like 5'11", 230. You got this guy who's like 6'4", close to 400. That's going to take its toll on your body faster when you're a bigger guy.
Yeah.
And by the time he was in his 30s, he was probably at his peak as a performer, and also in a tremendous amount of pain. Yeah. And back then, it was the pharmaceutical industry in pro wrestling, as Dana tells you.
Right.
She's right. And he got a Soma edition. A very bad Soma painkiller edition. We could talk about that with a lot of guys, but he was, you know, he had diabetes, and his doctor wasn't treating the diabetes, he was treating the pain, he was treating him with somas.
Yeah.
And that's where Dana's anger comes from, and you can understand it 100%. There's another man that I wish he had lived. So DDP and him are like this. DDP could have helped him. But he was probably at his best in the triple threat. We will talk more about the triple threat later. Shane Douglas is in this episode. There's a talent. He was the head of the triple threat. He was the ECW champion for a long time.
Yeah.
And carried that title with a lot of pride. He was a heck of a worker. There's a guy at WWE dropped the ball on with a stupid gimmick in the 90s.
Yep, old Dean.
Yeah. No. Shane Douglas can go, and he was great.
Yeah.
Good baby face too early on when he was getting his stripes, but great as a heel.
Yeah.
But it was those additions, particularly the painkillers, that really slowed Bam Bam down and, took us away from us much too soon. And this wasn't featured in, maybe it was featured very little in this episode. He did go in and save a kid from a burning house.
Yeah.
But he didn't go over the fact that he had like burns on 75% of his body. I remember reading that at one point. I don't think we heard about that. But that was actually
they didn't talk too much about that, no, but yeah.
Yeah, he decided to open a restaurant in Hamlin, which is about an hour from here, and I'm sorry I never went, called Bam Bam Bigelow's house, or Bam Bam Bigelow's restaurant. That didn't last very long, but he had a lot early on. He learned from his mistakes. He moved on. He was in a ton of pain and while still having a great relationship with his family, but he was hurting. He was hurting physically big time. And he was ahead of his time as a pro wrestler with that acrobatic style for a big man. And and he had a good run, but it could have been, it is a what could have been story. Because Bam Bam could go. I mean, even as he got older, and he was, and don't forget the Taz is great on here too. Taz goes against kayfabe and tells you the story about that match.
Yes.
Where they went through the ring.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Taz's like, I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm so old school.
I feel so dirty doing this.
Yeah.
I remember watching that match when it was happening. I was watching the pay-per-view, and man, when they do that, when he backs him up and he just off his feet and goes through the ring, and you watch Jim Molyneux, whoa, the crowd goes ballistic, and man, because you didn't expect that. Oh man. Oh, and of course, watching Bam Bam just drag his carcass out in 1, 2, 3. There you go. But then what was weird, this was a pretty decent match. But what was weird with the rest of that pay-per-view is they never fixed the hole. And the wrestlers literally had to work around this hole. They tied it off with police tape, and they did something to block it. But
so that wasn't the main event?
No. There was still like a couple of matches after that.
Oh my God.
No, I can't remember. I'll have to look up what the main event was, but or what finished it. But my goodness, it was like, they literally had to work around it in order to finish the main event. Trying to remember, was that Living Dangerously?
I'm not sure. I wasn't that much in ECW at that point.
Yeah, let me see here. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
This is, let's
Okay.
see. Let's see. Bam Bam Bigelow. Okay. All right. So, okay. So if let's see. Taz. Okay. So it was the world television title. Okay. So yes, he had made, you see where Bigelow was tapping, but then he's like tapping along the rope to
Yep.
count when to do the lunge back, and then that's when he falls backwards. That's when they go through the ring. The ring was damaged, and after the match, the ring crew began fixing the ring, resulting in the next scheduled match with Al Snow and John Cronus. Apparently got canceled because of that. But yeah, there was still, according to this card, there were still two matches. You still had Sabu against the Sandman, and then they did eventually do Al Snow and Lance Storm against Shane Douglas and Chris Candido.
Oh my.
I need to go back and watch that pay-per-view again, because I'm like, how the heck did they get around all that? But they managed. But anyway, yeah, Bam Bam Bigelow, like we mentioned before, he was injured, and he was like, I don't want to lose my spot.
Right.
Because he was climbing, and he didn't want to lose that spot. So all those somas and the painkillers, man, that's what just kept him going. So, okay, so now here's a trivia question for you. Who was Bigelow's manager on that first run?
In ECW?
No, in WWE.
It was Sir Oliver Humperdinck,
Yeah.
which I thought was really weird at that point.
Yeah, because who is Humperdinck usually known to manage?
Heels. Yeah.
I never saw, that was the first time I ever saw him manage a babyface before. And I don't remember, I don't think he was called Humperdinck at that time. I think he was called something else, but I remember the partnership didn't last really long.
Right.
But because I think one of the last appearances I saw him with, maybe, and I could be wrong, was WrestleMania 4. If you remember Bam Bam he was in that world title tournament.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
And he was eliminated in the first round. His opponent was One Man Gang. And they were fighting outside the ring. One Man Gang manages to get back inside the ring, and Bigelow just barely misses the 10 count. Here comes Bigelow. He's in, and he's like all of a house of fire. He's doing his cartwheels, but he lost the match. Right. And I think Humperdinck, I remember seeing, hey, get in the ring, and whatever. But yeah, he was eliminated early from that tournament because he didn't beat the 10 count back in. But and of course we all know how One Man Gang's thing would go on. He eventually he would lose to Savage. I think he did something where he did something else, but yeah, he had a bye. He had a bye. That's right, because the match after that was Jake and Rick Rude, and that went to a draw. Mm-hmm. And then so that gave One Man Gang the bye. So he went on to the next one. Here's Savage. He already wrestled 2 matches by the time he finally got in there with One Man Gang. Of course, One Man Gang winds up getting himself disqualified for using Slick's cane. And right. Well, then of course we all know what happens after that. But yeah. So there you go. Little trivia on that one for you. So but yeah, Bam Bam Bigelow, definitely a talent that was taken way too quickly. Would like to have, he was one of those guys. It was like the flames on his head, burned out a little too quickly. He did. He was rising like a shooting star, and he just burned out a little too quickly. And he just didn't take the time to let his character build and grow. I think Shane Douglas even mentions it was 11 years before they put a major title on me.
Yeah, that's right. He did say that.
So it's like, unfortunately, he wanted his success to be a little too quickly. But so we go from a shooting star who burned out maybe a little too quickly to one who, I don't know if he just burned out too quickly or if he just let the lifestyle catch up to him. But we're gonna I want to talk about Adrian Adonis. I remember he was another one I originally remembered from the wrestling magazines. He was over there in the AWA with Jesse the Body Ventura, as the East-West connection, and man, what a team those guys were. Great heel teams, a lot of legendary matches with them and Gagne and Brunzell. Fun story. I can remember tuning into the Phil Donahue show of all things. And they were actually on and had wrestling matches on the Phil Donahue show. And it was like a bunch of AWA guys. So I remember Adonis and Ventura.
I never saw that.
And I think it was Gagne and Brunzell. But yeah, I think there was like 2 or 3 matches on that. But yeah, they talked about they had a talk show on the Phil Donahue show. But yeah, Adonis, tough guy. He was the tough guy. He was the every man's man back in the tough streets of Buffalo. He meant business. And he managed to get into the wrestling industry, and he got paired. It was a great pairing with Ventura. Adonis could talk, but Ventura was definitely the better talker of the two, as Meltzer would say. But they worked so well as a team, and man, for a bigger kind of guy, Adonis could move. He certainly didn't have an Ultimate Warrior physique by any stretch of the imagination. But he could certainly move. He was a talented guy. He gets into the WWE, he carries that persona of the New York tough guy for a little while, and then they feel like he needs a change, or they feel like WWE needs to change him a little bit. And he turns into the adorable one. Now we've seen this kind of shtick before. We've seen it, with Buddy Rogers. We saw it with Gorgeous George. We saw, Adrian Street would do it for a while too.
He did.
Rest in peace, Adrian Street. So you had a lot of those kind of effeminate kind of character portrayals. So although, Adrian Adonis, the man, Keith Thankey, was far from that. He was very much a family man. Again, loved his wife, loved his children. Very evident in this episode. His wife, very, very, very solid in this episode. I thought she had some really good stories here. But again, he got caught up in that lifestyle, in the rock and roll lifestyle of the wrestler, and the cocaine and the drugs and all that stuff that started catching up to him, and Adrian just kind of let himself go. He got himself pretty heavy by the time he left WWE. I would love to have heard, God rest his soul, Roddy Piper. I would love to have heard that more. I would love to have heard him talk about the whole story build up with that, because I remember that whole thing taking over, and that's when you really started to love Roddy Piper.
Yeah,
big time when the Flower Show started up and taking over Piper's Pit. Boy, there was something about that's when you started really loving Roddy Piper, big time. You could forgive his sins of being against Hulkamania and what he did to Mr. T. No, we hated Adrian Adonis even more. So you wanted to gravitate then towards Roddy. So I would love to have heard more of that background. But, again, by the time he left, he got really super heavy. I think by the time he was up to like 400 pounds, and he could still move a little bit, but boy, you could tell it was getting to be much more of a chore. He eventually got himself back down under about 300 pounds or under. And then, he's wrestling in Canada. And then we have July 4th of 1988. The unfortunate incident of the accident, the car accident that would take his life. One of the Kelly twins, who, golly, the surviving twin, being on that show was just, golly, your heart just went out to that poor man. It's like the Corsican brothers. It's like he could feel, and he did everything his brother did. And it's like, man, just when I've always heard it said with twins, when one dies, the other one just really takes on that pain so much harder, and you really kind of get that. But boy, he just seemed like in such a good place. And then of course the Bear Man wrestler that they did, unfortunately three people's lives all tragically taken. The surviving twin seems to affirm there was no drugs, no alcohol.
Correct.
So, what exactly happens? Well, there was a story, I think, like a big animal came out on the road, and the car lost control and went into the ravine. It's either way, it's unfortunate. Just a very sad story. I remember reading about it in wrestling magazines. And Adrian Adonis, somebody was just taken way too quick, because I would have loved to have seen him. I would have loved to have seen him come back and make another WWE run, like Bret Hart said. Wow, what a match with him and Bret Hart, that would have been epic. That would have been great. But
yeah, I totally agree. And this may have been the episode I saw a lot of people really contributed to this episode. Bret Hart stuff on here was gold, especially when he tells the story when they go up to Adrian's Adrian's hotel room, and Adrian doesn't want to let Bret in, but Jim Neidhart says no, let him in. And it was like a meeting of the minds. Mr. Fuji, Iron Sheik, Roddy Piper, and they're all doing blow, and they're all talking about the business. And Bret's saying, I'm just sitting here and I'm sitting under the learning tree.
The learning tree, exactly.
And you think about those guys and all the years they had in the business. I mean, all their characters and all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you imagine that? And eventually he says, well, me and Jim were like, oh, Coke can turn you into a monster. Eventually we stopped hanging out with them. But I mean, we learned so much. But you got Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, both of the high flyers on here, were great. Greg's talking about how Adrian was such a talent, but they'd let himself go. They show a match from Las Vegas between Greg and Adrian at his peak weight. Greg's trying to put the abdominal stretch on him, and that is a sight that is not easy to watch, because by that point, Adrian gotten so huge, and they went 10 minutes and Adrian was exhausted. The thing about Adrian Weck, when he was in his early run, when he fought Backlund for the title, he could go. He was like 250. Yeah, he never had the greatest body, but that guy could go in his day. And I think what happened with him is he was getting a little heavier. They put in this episode, they left a lot off the bone. And I talked to John about this last week. They didn't talk about his WWF tag team run with title run with Dick Murdoch. They were a really good tag team.
Yeah, they were.
Even though, I mean, they were like complete opposites that worked really well. Do you remember the episode on, it might have been Tuesday Night Titans, when Adrian and Dick are walking through the streets in New York?
Boy, that's going back a ways, man. I don't know, but I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, people are going up to, and supposedly it was all real. It wasn't shtick. People were just going up to Adrian and going, "Hey, how's it going, buddy?" And Dick Murdoch was from Texas.
Yeah. And
supposedly very racist. I'm saying supposedly because I don't know for sure, but that was the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were polar opposites in that point, but a good tag team. They completely glossed over the feud with Piper. They talked a lot about the Dan Spivey match.
Yes.
Which, they talk a lot about that, and I can understand why they went there, because Dan, the thing with Adrian is when he started getting into coke, he started taking liberties in the ring and beating guys up for real. And he tried it with Spivey. And Spivey was just new to the business, but he was a big dude. Yeah. And he can defend himself, which you've heard stories about so many times over the years. He was somebody you didn't mess with. And I guess the second time he tried to do that to him in the ring, Spivey knocked his ass out. Then they go back to the locker room, and then Adrian goes at Spivey again. Spivey knocked him out with an uppercut.
Yeah.
From his knees.
Yeah.
Well, that tells you how Spivey can hit like a truck. And it took the shine off of Adrian because he was being a bully and then he got put in his place. I could see it being in here, but not as much time should have been given to it, in my opinion. Yeah. I think they should have talked more about his talent in the ring. I think they should have put more of a spotlight on his great matches with Backlund, his tag team with Murdoch winning the belts and defending them for, I don't know, probably 6 or 8 months or so. And then, of course, the feud with Piper. Now, the thing is, Adrian was going to have a feud with Hogan around the time that Spivey thing happened. I think maybe when Spivey
put him in his place.
when Spivey put him in his place, I think that put him down the card, too. Yeah. Because when you worked with Hogan, then you were rich.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure he got a good payday with Piper, but not like he would have with Hogan.
Yeah.
You know, so, but I mean, he learned his lesson. But, oh, yeah, everybody was great here. Dave Meltzer's on here. Dave Meltzer's another guy. I don't always agree with everything he says, but he is a heck of a historian. Mm-hmm. I can definitely listen to him. And they had his daughters on who were very good, along with his wife B. They talked about how Adrian was a totally different guy when he came home, bringing them presents, just hanging out, having a good time. He was a totally different person. And his friend Anthony Godino, who grew up with him, and back you're talking about when they were growing up, and Adrian was the guy you wanted on your side.
Yep.
So.
And it's sad story
for him, because when Adrian passed away, he was in prison.
Right.
So, he wasn't even able to go to the funeral. Mm-hmm. So
it just was another guy. I mean, it was a guy who, and we'll talk about this later, a guy who hit bottom, was coming back up again, and then we lost him. And we didn't lose him because of we didn't lose him because of an addiction. We lost him because of a car crash, or a van crash, which is sad because if he was young enough, he got himself back in his shape. He could have had a great run with Bret Hart, no doubt, or a lot of. I mean, we could have had a good run with Michaels, or maybe Undertaker at that point, or maybe a little older when Steve Austin. But by that point, I think he would be in his 40s. But yeah, he's still a lot of years left if he kept losing the weight, kept getting himself in better condition, because the guy was a bump machine.
Sure.
Is Goodnight Irene? That was the first time I saw the sleeper, was when he did, and he called it Goodnight Irene.
Yeah.
I never understood. Does anyone know why that atomizer said "relax with Trudy" on it? You know what I'm talking about.
I remember, yeah.
Was it the atomizer, or am I thinking of Rick Martel? Maybe it was.
No. Rick Martel had his was ignorance or arrogance.
Arrogance. Okay.
Yeah. Boy, I need to think about that one. Yeah. I need to look that one up. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, so we're telling you things that aren't on the episode here.
Yeah. Gosh, all the memories of watching all that stuff. Boy, I got to go back and watch some. Look through. Who I would have loved to have heard? I would have loved to have heard a little bit from Jesse himself.
I was thinking that as you were talking before. We should have got Jesse on.
I mean, I know it's hard tracking him down, and I'm sure he probably would have wanted way too much money to do it. But boy, it would have been great to have heard him talk about those early days with him and Adrian Adonis, in the East-West connection. But oh well, rest in peace, Adrian Adonis.
Rest in peace, Adrian Adonis. All the best to his family moving forward. And same thing before with Bam Bam Bigelow's family moving forward as well. Now, let's talk about, in my humble opinion, the best episode of the series. I'm sorry, of the season. And that's Chris and Tammy. And there's another guy who was an immense talent, who had fallen down and was getting himself back up. Something happened. Chris Candido, wow, another guy who was ahead of his time. Can you have seen if he had lived, even if he had lived, and he got himself rested up, healed all of his injuries, could you see matches with AJ Styles? Could you see the matches he'd have with Seth Rollins? Do you see the matches he'd have with
Eddie Chris,
Guerrero, Dean
Jericho.
Jericho? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Oh, his frame and his
mindset and everything, that would have just went so well in that 2000s era of or atmosphere of wrestling.
Because there was more focus on the wrestling at that point. You still had the over-the-top characters, but you had guys who can go. Or Chris Benoit. I mean, he was a great talent. Kurt Angle. Can you imagine Chris Candido, Kurt Angle? Oh my gosh. But what a talent in the ring. And this is a love story. This is a love story that went sour. You had this high school sweethearts who got into wrestling. Jim Cornette was their mentor. Jim Cornette helped develop them. And again, another great Jim Cornette episode. He brought them both in to Smoky Mountain in Tennessee, and he said, "Oh, I can't ask this talent to move." I think he lived in Jersey.
Yeah, Jersey.
I believe he was in Jersey. To move down here, I'm only going to pay him $75 a week. So he thought of Sonny, or I'm sorry, Tammy being a manager. She'd be Sonny later, and brought them both in, and she was going to go to school to be a doctor, I believe.
Yeah, doctor, a plastic surgeon.
And she was a natural for the wrestling business because she was great and fun. She looked great, but she had this natural charisma about her too. Yep. And she was a great heel because a lot of that was her in real life, which you find out later.
Yep.
And then he's coming along. He's becoming this great talent. He goes to WWE, and they put him in a tag team with the great Dr. Tom Pritchard in a stupid gimmick. We're workout enthusiasts. We're the Body Donnas. And these guys could both go. And I mean, these guys could go like the late 80s tag teams in the NWA.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see them going against like the Midnights and the Rock and Roll Express and Blanchard and
Hollywood Blondes?
And the Hollywood Blondes. Yeah, definitely. A lot of talent. The emphasis goes on Sonny because Sonny was very attractive. Most downloaded woman on America Online in 95 or 96, whatever it was. The first diva, really, and a lot of people would have said in her prime, the best diva. Naturally, gorgeous. She got the spotlight. Her star rose. His star fell. She hooks up with Shawn Michaels while still being with Chris, and Chris had to sit there and eat it because he didn't want to lose his spot.
Yeah.
And as Jim Cornette said, he could have broke his body in 15 places if he wanted to, but he wasn't going to do that to Shawn because Shawn was the man.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a great talent. But and Shawn's a different person now. Let's just say that.
Oh
too.
Yeah, much different.
Much different person now, in a much better place. So you have that, and he had the injury. He had injuries to his neck at first, to the point where he finally went to the hospital and they said, "Where's the accident report?" Oh, what do you mean? Well, you were in a car accident. He goes, "No, I'm a pro wrestler." He was working in pain.
big time.
And then later, he would really take off when he go to ECW. And by that point, with the triple threat, with the great Bam Bam Bigelow and the great Shane Douglas. And there he shined like the sun. Because one thing about ECW, they had a lot of crazy stuff going on, but their fans had a ton of respect for guys who can go. And that was Candido. Candido was an old school wrestler, black boots, black trunks, come out, put on a show. They have Lance Storm in here. Lance Storm was another guy who can go. One thing about Candido, and I think this would have led to those injuries, the neck and the back, upper back neck injuries, that finisher, the power bomb off the top.
That's a brutal finisher.
And every night they were doing that to each other. Lance, I hope you have a great life after this, because oh my God, I'm glad you're in a good place now, but oh my God, that cannot be good on the body.
No,
long term.
No.
So he had his injuries, but his stars shined in WCW. I'm sorry, ECW. His brother Johnny, spectacular here.
Yeah, great. He was
Thick
great.
as thieves. They go back to Chris's old boyhood home. Chris made his own title belt when he was like 12 years old.
That was cool. That was
a cool title belt. And his mom, Peggy Ray.
Peggy Ray, yeah.
She was great here too.
Yeah.
Spectacular episode. But then you see on here, you saw Chris's star fall and then rise again. Then you saw Tammy's star rise and then fall. Because by the time they put them back together, Tammy had a lot of substance issues, which we'll get into in a few minutes. And Chris's star was starting to rise because he was in a federation that appreciated athleticism and appreciated his talents. But because of those injuries, he had to start taking the pills. And that nearly got the best of him. Well, and then he hits bottom. I gotta ask you this, John. This is something that was interesting. They bring him back at ECW. They had them working in the office for doing the
like travel booking
and
different things like that.
And then they wound up losing their house over it. How did they lose their house if it's Paul Heyman's federation?
Well, because
I think how did they say it? Like they were paying for it, and then they were getting reimbursed with cash, and then the cash wasn't coming back in, and the debts just kept coming, and it's just like all the ECW stories you hear. The checks are bouncing like basketballs, and the money just wasn't there, and it sounded like that was another case where everything, they were trying to do something, and then they wound up getting screwed because of it, because the money wasn't coming back to them. So, that
happened, and then he hits bottom, realizes it when him and Johnny are talking. I'm going to make another run. I'm still young. He's coming back. He breaks his ankle in the ring. Right after he has the surgery, he went on an airplane. And they tell you after surgery, don't
do
fly.
that.
And then he has a blood clot. It goes up to his lungs. He gets pneumonia, and he's gone.
Yeah.
So another guy who was hit bottom on his way back up, and something else gets him.
Something
he dies
really
from
freaky.
A broken ankle.
Yeah. And then to watch Cornette, Storm, Pritchard, and
Johnny Candido.
and yeah, his brother. I'll watch all four of them just literally become full of tears. Oh man, I mean, that just goes to show what kind of a person Chris was. And that's the kind of friend he was to these guys. So yeah, that was hard to watch. That was so hard to watch because we always talk about Cornette. You always hear him being this. Most of the time he coming across really foul mouthed at times when he's on his show, or he doesn't usually hold back too much, and he's his viewpoints on certain things can get really really out there. But so when you see him really just strip all that stuff away, and you see the human part of Jim Cornette just really lose it, and because this is like the second or third time we would see him do that on this show, that's saying something. And then same with Lance. I mean, Lance Storm really was, even here it is, what, almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
And and it's still hard to talk about. That's yeah, it's a testament. I only hope that somebody, when after I'm dead and gone, I hope somebody breaks down and cries over talking about me 20 years later. I don't think they will, but I mean, that would be, it would certainly be endearing. But one of the things that you could tell something wasn't right with Chris and Tammy was some of those promos Tammy would do on ECW.
Yes.
They showed that one.
She'd be out of it.
Oh my gosh. I mean, talking about the drinking, and it's like, and they were not like that. They were clean living, kind of clean to the body kind of people for the longest time. And I think Tammy was one until WWE. And I think Tammy first got into it, and then eventually Chris, but my goodness, that's pretty much when, Tammy never recovered from that.
No.
I mean, if you really want to be honest, after all of that, Tammy went right down the tubes.
Yeah.
And what was the one thing that propelled Sable over Sonny? The willingness that Sable was willing to do Playboy, and at the time, Tammy didn't want to do that.
Right.
And Sable gets in Playboy, while all of a sudden, hey, we got this new hot sex symbol. So of course they're going to push her to the roof, to the moon, and she becomes this hot commodity. And then Sonny just they keep putting Sonny in all these goofy, she was the LOD's manager for a little bit, and then
yes,
she did that thing with the Godwins, and then she did all this other stuff, and but she just then she got into she got away from all that, she got into ECW, but then that's when everything just went downhill with her, because she just never recovered. And then eventually she would go into the porn stuff. She would start doing that stuff with Missy Hyatt, and then she started, then there was all these talks about movies and and all this other stuff. And then of course by that point, Sonny is not the Sonny that we remember downloading in 1996.
Right.
Sonny's put on quite a bit of weight, and she's not looking Sonny anymore. And I don't know, maybe, and I guess after Chris passed away, that probably helped her spiral even further out of control. But she never got, I mean, she tried, but she never got back to the original Sonny body, that she had. But I do, before we go into the last bits of Sonny, I do have to bring one more Chris Candido memory. Horowitz wins.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was a sign that Chris Candido's sign or star was starting to downplay a little bit. If they put Horowitz over Candido like that.
That was in WWF.
That was right? WWF. Yeah, that was WWF. That was like a big, that was like, I don't know if they were trying to knock him down a little bit because of his character being the show off, and Horowitz catches him in that small package, and he cradles him up, and for the 1, 2, 3, that started a little feud with him, which is like pointless. It's like, why, this is below mid card, level here. So, it's not that Horowitz was putting people over, but I mean, why? Why did he get knocked down like that? But
yeah, I remember that happening. I was just trying to remember what federation was in. If
Yeah.
that was in ECW, I don't think.
No, that was WWF, because I think I can remember it was Jim Ross saying it.
I remember him saying it now, but I'm just trying to figure it out. Yeah, that it seemed like punishment then. But if it happened in ECW, it wouldn't have been so much because Horowitz was a heck of a worker too.
Yeah.
So a guy like Horowitz would have had a lot more respect, and he would have gotten much bigger a push.
Sure.
And but yeah, I do remember that now. Yeah, he put over Horowitz, a great worker who they had always lose, but he had the great out in the back. And by the way, check out his stuff on YouTube. He's got a good memory. He's got a lot of stories.
Oh,
too.
I'm sure he does.
Oh yeah, definitely check him out. But yeah, I do remember that. But Sunny, she eventually moved to Palmerton, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Jim Thorpe. And
I love Palmerton. I love driving through Palmerton. For me, driving to Palmerton, from where I lived, you take this road, it's called 248, and you drive on 248, and you get to this little mountain that overlooks the river, and up there's like a slate hill kind of thing. And I remember there was this house up at the top of this slate mountain. It, back in the old days, it kind of looked like the Psycho House.
Okay.
It had this. It was an old mansion built in the 1880s, and it's still there. But it looked kind of creepy because it looked kind of run down looking. It kind of looked like a haunted house kind of thing. But yeah, no. But yes, I got many a pair of shoes in Palmerton because they had a special store there. But we're getting away from the topic at hand. But anyway, yes, lived in Palmerton.
She lived in Palmerton, which is not far from Jim Thorpe, and I've spent many a night in Jim Thorpe, and to this day, I always thought, when she was in Palmerton, I always thought maybe I'd see her because I went through Palmerton a few times because I had friends in Palmerton. I had a friend who grew up in Palmerton, but still a friend. But she this was a really a downward spiral here because she had DUIs when she was living in Palmerton. She would lose her license but keep driving. They're trying to do these things to you as a deterrent, to try to teach you something so you can learn from your mistakes. And I remember, I don't know if I said this to someone or if I heard someone say this in the wrestling business. I remember saying or hearing she's going to have to kill somebody before she learns her lesson. And what did she do?
Boy, yeah. Tell me about it. Yep. Which she now apparently has pled guilty to. At first she didn't, but I believe somewhere along the line, I think she was finally convinced to plead guilty to it. And she'll probably receive a sentence of up to about 25 years, and boy, the picture of her now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, does not resemble what you remember from the 90s, where a lot of even the divas have aged pretty gracefully. Some of them haven't changed much at all. This is not, no. I mean, you're given these opportunities to learn from your mistakes. And her last mistake cost a 75-year-old man his life.
Yeah.
And it sucks. And
yeah, it really does.
It's just, you're getting all these DUIs, and she had like probably 8 or 9 of them. This
Easily.
isn't one, oh, I learned my lesson. Oh, two, I learned my lesson. This was 8 or 9. I might be underestimating it. I mean, if you do a search out on the internet, you'll see it.
Yeah.
But the last one I believe was in Florida.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. This incident happened in Florida.
right.
So
Yeah, it again, it's like, it's almost like the same thing with Marty Jannetty. How many times can you screw yourself up before you finally start learning to make, to get, stop making the same mistake all the time, or stop making bad choices leading to these mistakes. But
and I'm no saint, but
no, me either.
I mean,
Far
it's
from
just
it.
like, yeah, I mean, it's just no, I haven't made my mistakes, but when you see that, you're like, how many more times? It's just it's sad.
yes, it is.
It's
It
sad
is
for those left behind too.
yeah, it is. It is.
But yeah, I mean, the to say that she'll probably ultimately spend the rest of her life in prison, I think that's a fair assessment.
You guys,
And and then let's see how WWE handles her Hall of Fame thing.
she's in, right?
She is in, yeah,
She's
yeah,
in.
yeah. I think there was the story of her trying to pawn off her ring, I think, but yeah, I don't know if she ever did, but yeah, she's in, and she got in better shape, but then she just went, but and so a lot of people wonder, why is she in, but China doesn't have that same recognition. Yeah, she's in, but not to the same level as Tammy did, and I think China certainly deserves it just as much. But
Agreed.
yeah, it's and I admit I was a Sunny person back in the day. I certainly loved her back then. But then yeah, you just kept seeing her making that mistake after mistake after mistake, and she just never recovered. You wanted to have sympathy for her. You really wanted to find it in your heart to have the sympathy for her, and
Yes.
it just was never gonna happen. So yeah, that was again, thankful that this was focused more on Chris, more so than Tammy. Because Tammy, I think, could be a 2 or 3 part episode. But so I'm glad they stuck with mostly just Chris in this one.
No doubt.
But yeah, a talent taken far, far too soon again. And but I'm going to touch base on just a little bit of the other episodes, just real briefly. We had the JYD episode, which was a great episode. His nephew here was told had brought a lot of good stuff in. When I saw the episode, I completely forgot about his daughter passing away, and I remember her accepting, JYD into the Hall of Fame. I remember watching the Ernie Ladd speech and everything, and so that was I was sad to hear that she passed away, and again, just like the addictions just caught up with him, and it's just he just never bounced back, and that was unfortunate. You have let me see here. You had a Magnum TA. Again, with the story of Magnum TA, I didn't get to see much of him before the accident, so I didn't really get to know him that well as a character. I thought the saddest part of the whole thing was the Buzz Sawyer wrestling license story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't realize just how much of a jerk Buzz Sawyer could really be, but well, there you go. But as we mentioned about Eddie Graham, he went down to Florida, and that's where the education really started for him.
Yep. That's right.
Strong story there. Doink the Clown with Bourne.
Matt Bourne.
Matt Bourne. Thank you. His first name just suddenly left me. Again, I think it was just another interchangeable story here. Drugs, addiction, rock and roll lifestyle type of thing, and it just a lot of these guys were having that. Again, sad story for Matt Osborne. Matt Bourne. He just couldn't get cleaned. He just had that tough lifestyle. His story reminded me more of the movie The Wrestler with what's his name?
Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke. Thank you. To me, his story reminded me a lot of him.
Yes. But just let's give him credit, though. He was in the first WrestleMania. He fought Ricky Steamboat in the first WrestleMania, and he really took that character of Doink the Clown.
Oh, yeah.
Really brought that to life. I mean, that tells you how much of a talent this guy was. He took just a clown episode, a clown character, and he made it respectable. So,
you
gotta admire his talents, but he did have his demons.
Yeah. And then, of course, the one story that didn't have any demons was, of course, the Bash at the Beach 2000 story, which I know has been talked about ad nauseum at different spots. Probably different. It was nice, I think, to hear Jeff Jarrett's take on it.
Yes.
From his perspective. But again, between Russo and Bischoff, you don't know really who to believe, so there again. But
you got the fast version, and then you got the smug version.
Yeah,
and then you got Meltzer, and neither one of them like Meltzer.
and somewhere out there's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
How many stories they say it's between two people. There's always three sides of the story. There's his side, there's the other side, and then there's the truth.
Right.
So somewhere out there is the real truth of what really happened.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, those were the other episodes in that season. It was another banger of a season. Oh, and lest we forget about Abdullah the Butcher. This could have been a great episode if they'd stayed away from Hannibal.
I agree completely.
I think I would have loved to have known more of how and why Larry Sharpe, Abdullah the Butcher, had a second grade. Larry Shreve, rather. Larry Shreve, not Sharpe. He only had a second grade education, pretty much, and how he got to be where he was on a second grade education, not being able to read and write.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a huge story there, but they wind up spending so much time on this Hannibal guy. And for anybody who just wants a good laugh at Hannibal's expense, just watch the Jim Cornette, Brian Last part where they talk about this episode, and Brian Last just does this phenomenal impersonation of Hannibal. It's a shame that they had to spend so much time on that, but maybe that was the dark side of the ring part for Abdullah. But I think just not knowing that he can only read up to a second grade level and write, and how he got by with that, to me, they could have done so much more with that. But
agreed.
Anyway, I don't know what kind of stuff they can get lined up for season 5. Personally, I would like to see Daphne.
Oh yes.
I think that would be a very strong story to talk about. Louis Spicoli.
No doubt. That would be, yep. There's more addiction issues there.
Let me think. I had another one in my head and I can't remember who it was now. I had a third person, and whoever it was, it just Test.
Oh yeah, Test would be great.
Test would be another good, with again, maybe too many people in the WWE who won't talk, would Vince won't allow them to get on Vice for something like this. But Test I think would be another story that I would certainly be interested in hearing more of. If you really want to get to an obscure story, I think it was a CZW wrestler, and I can't think of the guy's name, but he was known for doing some really dumb spots. And he did this one spot where he did like a somersault Styles Clash from the top rope on some guy.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. I want to say it was like Evan Bourne's brother or something. It's somebody like that. Okay. I can't remember the guy's name, but he winds up having he has a sad ending to his story and to his life. But that was one of the things he wound up being known for, is he did this ridiculous spot. But anyway, that would be like a really obscure story, which nobody would even know about. I don't know, John, can you think of any other story that you would like to see brought out?
Billy Graham.
Yes. Yes, actually. Yes. God rest his soul.
Yeah, God rest his soul. But there's layers there. Layers. Oh my gosh. That would be, for us old school guys, that would be a great 2-part episode.
Mhm.
I mean, that's one that comes to my mind because just all the stuff that happened after his career ended alone.
Oh gosh,
I
yeah.
mean, his name was always out there, but most of the time not for a good reason.
No, he was always
Really salty about a lot of people.
He was, and he used chicanery. He wasn't the most honest person in the world.
No.
Yeah, that one I think they could get a lot. There's a lot of meat on the bone on that one. Just for that one. I mean, there's others I could think of, but I don't know how scintillating the stories would be. Like just talents that have left us too soon.
Yeah.
I don't know how much dark would be to it, you know?
Yeah.
One just came to mind after we talked about Billy Graham. David Sammartino.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But he's in a good place.
He is in a good place.
He's in a good place now.
But
he's
still where he was in his estrangement to his dad and stuff like that. And I think there could be something there. I don't know. Maybe
you gotta get Ron Shaw on there though.
Oh yeah.
You got to get Ron Shaw on there because he would be gold on that. If you ever hear, did you ever see that match?
It's probably been a long time.
Oh,
I'll have to look that up though. But yeah.
Okay. Well, that one's an easy one to find on YouTube as well.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So there's probably lots of great stories out there that could be told.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get into a match, I would like to see, well, of course, again, it's WWE property, so they probably wouldn't be able to, but the Buzz Sawyer Tommy Rich match.
Oh my gosh.
That the big Hell in a Cell, probably where the Hell in a Cell idea came from.
Tommy's still around.
And Tommy's still around. So he could.
Tommy's still training wrestlers too.
And he doesn't work for WWE, so he could certainly talk about it.
He never did work for them, never.
No, he never did. No, if he did, it was maybe like a one-shot done, but that was it. But
Tommy Rich's story alone, I think, would be good.
Yeah, actually, it could.
He had a lot of ups and downs. I mean, he's had an interesting career, and
yes,
and he's still very vital in the industry as a trainer.
Yeah. He's done.
He has made up for himself pretty well. Yeah. So I'm sure Ken Patera. With what happened with him at McDonald's, and some of the trials and tribulations of what happened with him, that could be something they could talk about. So yeah, the possibilities are certainly out there if anybody wants to really go dig for them. So there you go. So what did y'all think about season 4 of Dark Side of the Ring? What have you thought about the whole Dark Side series? It's been a pretty deep series. It's been an emotional roller coaster ride for all of us wrestling fans, especially us old school guys.
Yeah, that's right.
So John the Music Note, we don't have as much to talk about as far as where to look for us coming up here, I think, because we both had a rather quiet week, I think.
Right, we did, because of other things going on in our lives.
Yes.
So but the show that John and I did with Peter Wicks and Peter Kerr, Alice Cooper from the Inside, that's going to premiere the night before you see this episode. So it will be premiering on August 22nd.
Yep.
So definitely check that out, where we touch on a great Alice Cooper album that doesn't get enough recognition.
Yep. Yeah, and after that,
I think there's a Contrarians episode I appeared on Instrumentals. I'm not sure when that's going to hit. So I know that's out there in the can somewhere. And then other than that, you see us doing our thing here. Next week we're gonna bring a kind of a special one-off topic. We're not going to talk about it yet, right? But we do have it'll be a special topic that we're going to do. And then we'll get into the catalog of Armored Saint, who are supposed to be on tour with Wasp, and that John the Music Nut was supposed to have seen
this coming Friday.
Yeah. So we had plans for doing that. We were going to get we were going to get Jake, not from State
Not from
Farm.
State Farm.
And because he was supposed to see him in Omaha, and then my buddy Roger Serreras from the North and South Rock and Metal Connection was supposed to see him up in Canada, and well, of course that didn't happen. So I was going to try and get the four of us on, so y'all could make me feel bad for getting to see the second leg of the tour that I didn't get to see. So, but now none of us got to see it, so that show didn't that didn't get to do. But anyway,
well, hopefully next year, when they come back out, we'll all get to see it, you know?
Yes.
That's what I'm hoping.
Yes, that's what I'm hoping for.
I'll figure out a way to go see it whatever the closest way is. If I got to fly to Pennsylvania and tag along with you to go see it, so be it.
That'd be fun.
That would be a lot of fun. But so there you go. So this has been the 5 Count, as we like to call our wrestling shows. And for my co-captain, John the Music Nut, John Clauser, Johnny Metal, the Metal Dad, we will see you next week with like I said, a special little one-off topic that is going to be a 5 count type of thing, but it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a good one. You'll enjoy it. We will see you next week. Take care and get that 5 count in. We'll see you soon.
Take care now.